I should have known something was wrong the minute I saw that place. 2 years of lawyers and court dates fighting off cousins I'd never even met who swore Aunt Mary wasn't right in the head when she signed that will. 2 years of depositions and psychiatric evaluations and handwriting experts. And for what? 300 acres of Maine swampland that looked like God forgot to finish making it. The rental car's GPS gave up about 20 miles outside Millinocket. Just stopped working, like the satellites couldn't find me anymore. Had to use the hand-drawn map the lawyer gave me, following logging roads that hadn't seen maintenance since the Reagan administration. Every pothole felt personal. When I finally pulled up to the property, the Victorian farmhouse stood there like something out of a fever dream. 3 stories of peeling white paint and broken gingerbread trim, surrounded by what had to be the sorriest excuse for cranberry bogs I'd ever seen. Not that I knew much about cranberry farming, but even I could tell these hadn't been productive in decades. The water was wrong. That's what hit me first. Cranberry bogs are supposed to be shallow, controlled. These had gone wild, spreading out in every direction like spilled ink. Black water that didn't reflect the sky right, just showed you the twisted pine trees leaning over it like they were trying to drink. I'd driven straight through from Boston, 14 hours with nothing but gas station coffee and whatever counted as food at rest stops. The plan was simple. Get in, look around, take some pictures for the Northwood timber people, get out. They'd offered $70,000 more than any reasonable assessment would justify. Should have been my first warning, but after 2 years of legal bills, I wasn't asking questions. The house key was under a fake rock by the porch steps, exactly where the lawyer said it would be. The front door stuck, then gave way so suddenly I nearly fell into the entrance hall. Dust motes swirled in the afternoon light coming through a cracked window. The place smelled like old wood and something else, sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. I dropped my overnight bag by the door and did a quick walkthrough. Furniture covered in sheets, photographs on the mantel too faded to make out faces, kitchen with a hand pump instead of a faucet. Aunt Mary had lived here alone for 40 years after Uncle Pete died. How she managed it I couldn't figure. The nearest neighbor, according to the lawyer, was Nathan Ferguson, and his farm was 15 miles away through wetlands that turned to quicksand in spring. That first night, I slept in my clothes on a moldy couch, too tired to find clean sheets. Woke up to absolute silence. No cars, no planes, not even birds. Just the house settling around me and my own breathing. Morning came gray and damp. I made instant coffee with bottled water I'd brought, standing at the kitchen window looking out at those black pools. The property lines needed walking if I was going to give Northwood accurate information. 300 acres is bigger than you think when you have to cover it on foot. I started early, following what might have been an old maintenance road along the bog edges. The ground was spongy, giving way under each step like it might swallow me if I stood still too long. Pine needles carpeted everything, muffling sound. My work boots, the only concession to rural life I'd made, squelched with each step. About an hour in, maybe a mile from the house, I heard it. Children laughing. The sound froze me mid-step. High, bright voices carrying across the water, the kind of carefree noise kids make when they're playing tag or hide and seek. But that was impossible. There were no neighbors for miles, no roads that direction except logging tracks that hadn't seen use in decades. I stood there, coffee cooling in my travel mug, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. The laughter echoed off the water, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then it stopped, cut off like someone had thrown a switch. The silence after was worse than before. Heavier. I could hear my own heartbeat. "Hello?" My voice cracked, cleared my throat, tried again. "Anyone out there?" Nothing. I kept walking, but slower now, listening. The maintenance road curved, following the irregular shore of the largest bog pool. The water here was different, darker if that was possible. No vegetation grew near the edges, just bare mud that looked like it had been baked and cracked despite the constant damp. Then the laughter came again. Closer this time. Multiple voices, definitely children. Young ones, maybe 8 or 9 years old. They were singing something, a rhyme or game song, but I couldn't make out the words. My hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from wrongness. Kids had no business being out here. If they'd gotten lost, if something had happened to their parents. I picked up my pace, following the sounds. The path opened into a small clearing where an old wooden dock jutted into the bog pool. The structure looked ancient, gray planks warped and cracked, some missing entirely. Rope handrails had rotted to threads. The singing was coming from the water near the dock. I approached carefully, testing each board before putting my weight on it. The wood groaned, but held. About halfway out, I could see over the edge into the water below. At first, I thought they were logs, pale shapes drifting maybe 3 feet down, moving with some unfelt current. The water was clearer here than I'd expected, like looking through amber glass. I leaned further, trying to understand what I was seeing. One of the shapes rolled slightly, caught the light different. My brain took a long moment to process what my eyes already knew. That wasn't wood grain I was looking at. Those parallel lines were too regular, too familiar. The shape was wrong for a log, too curved, too delicate. A rib cage. Small. Child-sized. It surfaced briefly, just breaking the water's skin, showing the full pale curve of bones picked clean before sinking back down to join the others drifting in that horrible slow dance. I made the call right there on the dock, my hands still shaking from what I'd seen in the water. Had to try Sheriff Haley's number 3 times before my fingers cooperated enough to hit the right buttons. The phone rang twice, then his gruff voice came through. "County Sheriff's Office. This is Daniel Washington," I said, forcing the words past the tightness in my throat. "I'm out at the old Washington property." The line went dead. Not static, not a dropped call. Just sudden, complete silence. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. Full battery, but the signal bars that had shown 3 solid lines during my drive from Portland, gone. Nothing. No service. I tried again. Nothing. Turned the phone off and on. Still nothing. The walk back to the farmhouse took longer than it should have. Kept stopping to check the phone like maybe the signal would magically return if I just found the right spot. But every clearing, every rise in the path, nothing. The device that had worked perfectly for 14 hours of driving through rural Maine had become a useless chunk of plastic the moment I needed it most. By the time I reached the house, afternoon shadows stretched long across the overgrown yard. The kitchen felt colder than when I'd left. I set the dead phone on the counter and stood there, trying to think through what had just happened. The sheriff's office had hung up on me, or the line had been cut. Either way, the message was clear. Nobody wanted to hear about what was in that water. That evening, I found myself in Mary's study. Hadn't planned to go through her papers yet, thought I'd wait until after the timber company's assessment. But sitting alone in that house with those small bones drifting through my mind, I needed answers. The study hadn't been touched in years. Dust motes floated through the last rays of sunlight slanting through yellowed curtains. Mary's desk dominated the room, one of those massive oak numbers with dozens of little drawers and compartments, the kind of desk that suggested secrets. I started with the obvious places. Main drawers held the usual: old bills, tax records going back to the 70s, birthday cards from relatives I'd never heard of. The filing cabinet beside the desk contained property documents, maintenance records for the bogs back when they'd been active. Normal stuff. Boring stuff. But Mary had been nothing if not methodical. Always had been, even when I was a kid visiting for summers. Everything in its place, she'd say, tapping my hand when I'd leave a glass on her good table. So when I found a folder shoved behind the others in the bottom drawer, not filed properly, just crammed back there, I knew it meant something. The newspaper clippings inside had yellowed to the color of old bones. 6 children missing after camping trip, read the first headline. October 15th, 1987. My hands steadied as I spread the articles across the desk. Pastor Brody Hayes from Sacred Heart Methodist had taken a group of kids camping. 6 of them, Nicole Haynes, Kai Lynch, Chelsea Shepard, and 3 others whose names had been smudged beyond reading, had wandered off during an evening prayer service. The initial search had focused on the woods, but by day 2, they'd shifted to the cranberry bogs. The article included a quote from the search coordinator. "The water presents unique challenges, but we remain hopeful." The next clipping, dated October 18th, reported the search had been called off. After only 3 days, 6 kids missing, and they'd just stopped looking. No explanation, no bodies found. The parents quoted in the article seemed confused, talking about pressure from unnamed officials to accept that the children had simply vanished. But it was Mary's handwriting in the margins that made my stomach turn. "Keeping them quiet now," she'd written beside a photo of the search team. Her careful script, the same handwriting that had labeled jars of preserves and signed birthday cards. Feeding schedule, 1st and 15th of each month, no more than 2 hours after sunset. I set the clipping down and rubbed my eyes. Feeding schedule. Christ. The last item in the folder was a hand-drawn map. Mary's work again. I recognized her precise way of marking distances. The bog system laid out in blue ink, the maintenance road marked in black, and there, right where I'd found it, a small square labeled dock. But she hadn't called it a dock in her notation. She'd written playground. I left the papers spread across the desk and walked to the window. Full dark had settled over the property. Through the glass, I could see the distant glimmer of the bog pools reflecting starlight. Or so I thought, until I realized the angles were wrong. The light wasn't coming from above. The bog water itself was glowing. Not bright like electric light. More like those glow sticks kids crack at Halloween, that sick green phosphorescence that makes everything look wrong. The light pulsed, stronger, weaker, stronger again, like something breathing down there in the dark water. I watched it spread across the nearest pool. The glow would start at the edges, creep toward the center, then fade back. Each pulse threw shadows up the side of the farmhouse, long, twisted shadows that didn't match any trees or structures I could see. They crawled across the white clapboard siding like reaching fingers. That first night, I told myself it was some kind of algae, bioluminescence, natural phenomenon. I'd read about it happening in ocean water. No reason it couldn't happen in a bog. I pulled the study curtains shut and went to bed early, leaving every light in the house burning. Woke up at 3:15 to find the shadows dancing on my bedroom ceiling. The glow had intensified. Even through the drawn curtains, that diseased light found its way in. The shadows moved independent of the pulsing, sliding across the plaster in patterns that almost made sense if you watched too long. I lay there, blanket pulled to my chin like I was 8 years old again, and watched those shadows chase each other until dawn finally killed the glow. When I went downstairs, I found the first handprints. Tiny ones, pressed against the kitchen window. 5 perfect little prints at exactly the height a child would reach. The morning dew outlined them clearly, small palms, delicate fingers splayed against the glass. Like someone had stood outside trying to look in. I grabbed paper towels and Windex from under the sink, scrubbed until the glass squeaked. Told myself it was just condensation, some trick of moisture and temperature. Never mind that the prints were too perfect, too clearly defined. Never mind that I could see the whirls of tiny fingerprints in the residue. The second night was worse. The glow came earlier, just after sunset. This time it wasn't just green. Threads of blue and violet wove through it, creating patterns that hurt to follow. The shadows on the walls moved with purpose now. They gathered in corners, stretched toward doorways, pooled beneath windows like they were trying to find a way in. I didn't even try to sleep. Sat in the living room with every light blazing, Mary's papers spread on the coffee table. Read those articles again and again, trying to make sense of feeding schedules and playground notations, trying not to think about small bones drifting in amber water. The phosphorescence peaked around 2 in the morning. The whole bog system lit up like a diseased constellation. Through the window, I could see the water churning. Not from wind. The air was dead still. The water moved on its own, forming whirlpools that glowed from within before collapsing into new patterns. When dawn came and the light finally died, I found handprints on every ground floor window. Dozens of them. Different sizes. Some so small they could only belong to a toddler. Others the size of a 10-year-old's hand. All at child height. All pressed against the glass like they'd been trying to get inside. Some overlapped, as if multiple children had crowded the same window. The dining room window showed a clear set of prints where someone had pressed their entire face against the glass. I could see the nose smudge, the forehead mark, the perfect arc where lips had touched. I used an entire roll of paper towels, cleaning them away. Went through half a bottle of Windex, scrubbed until my shoulders ached and the windows reflected nothing but empty yard. The third night, I decided to watch. Set myself up in the kitchen with a clear view of the back windows. Turned off all the inside lights so I could see out better. Waited. The glow started at 9:37, earlier than before. The shadows came with it, sliding up the walls like old friends returning home. But I kept my eyes on the windows, watching for movement outside. At 11:23, they came, not all at once. First, just a flicker at the edge of the tree line, then another, pale shapes moving through the phosphorescent haze. They didn't walk right, too fluid, too quick, stopping and starting without warning, like film running at the wrong speed. They came closer, close enough that I could make out details in the sick light from the bog. Children, or things that had been children once. Their clothes hung in tatters, fragments of 80s fashion clinging to frames that weren't quite solid anymore. They moved in groups, holding hands sometimes, separating and reforming like schools of fish. Their faces, I looked away. Had to. Some things your mind just won't hold on to, like trying to grip water. When I looked back, they were at the windows. The morning after watching those kids press against my windows, I stumbled out to the porch with my coffee and nearly dropped the mug. A swing set stood in the side yard, the old-fashioned kind with chains that creaked and A-frame legs rusted through in spots. Hadn't been there the night before. I'd walked that exact patch of grass. The chains hung crooked, one swing missing its seat entirely, just chains dangling. The other seat was cracked plastic, sun-bleached from pink to dirty white. Morning fog drifted around the legs, but I could see how they'd punched deep into the soft ground. 4 perfect holes, like someone had driven them down with a pile driver. I set my coffee on the porch rail and walked closer. The metal was cold under my fingers, flakes of rust coming off orange on my palm. Real as anything, but wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. The angle it sat at, the way shadows fell through the chains, how the fog seemed to avoid touching the crossbar. When I turned back to the house, more equipment had appeared. Monkey bars stretched along the property line, half the rungs missing or bent at bad angles. A seesaw lay collapsed near the bog path, its pivot rusted through and boards split down the middle. These things hadn't just appeared, they'd been placed, arranged, like someone setting up a yard sale in the dark. The seesaw bothered me most. One end had sunk deep into the mud, the board warped from years of weather, but fresh handprints marked the seats, small handprints in the moisture, clear as if pressed there minutes ago. I went inside for my work gloves. By the time I came back out, the fog had thickened, could barely see 20 feet, but I knew where everything was, could feel it somehow, like pressure changes before a storm. The swing set to my left, monkey bars straight ahead, seesaw off to the right where the yard met the tree line. Tried to pull the seesaw free first. The wood came apart in my hands, soft as cardboard. Underneath where it had been, the ground showed a perfect rectangular impression. Not just pressed grass, an actual indent, maybe 3 inches deep, edges sharp as if cut with a knife. The monkey bars wouldn't budge. I gripped one of the remaining rungs and pulled hard enough to feel it in my shoulders. Nothing. Like they'd grown roots. The metal was colder than it should have been, colder than the morning air. My gloves stuck to it briefly when I let go. By noon, the fog had burned off. I made another cup of coffee and sat on the porch steps, watching the equipment, waiting. The sun climbed higher, shadows shortened, and around 2 o'clock, something changed. The swing set started to fade, not all at once, more like someone turning down the opacity on a photo. I could see through the chains to the trees beyond, then through the frame. Then it was gone. Just those 4 holes in the ground. The monkey bars went next, shimmering like heat mirages before vanishing. The seesaw lasted longest, but by 3:30 it had faded too. Only the impressions remained. Perfect rectangles and circles pressed into my yard, measuring out a playground that shouldn't exist. I spent the rest of the day inside, going through more of Mary's papers. But my mind kept drifting to those holes in the ground. Come sunset, I watched from the kitchen window. Sure enough, as darkness fell, new shapes began forming in the fog. Different equipment this time. A merry-go-round near the driveway. One of those spring riders shaped like a horse. A sandbox with no sand. All of it wrong. All of it cold. All of it gone by morning, leaving only marks in the earth. The basement door stuck when I tried it the next afternoon. Had to shoulder it open, the wood swollen from years of Maine humidity. The stairs groaned under my weight, and that basement smell hit me. Mildew and old concrete and something else underneath. Sweet, almost. Like flowers left too long in a vase. I pulled the chain for the single bulb. Weak yellow light showed concrete walls, exposed beams, the usual basement junk. Old lawn chairs, paint cans, a workbench thick with dust, but the back wall looked different, newer. The concrete there was smoother, a slightly different color, didn't match the rest. Took me 20 minutes of looking before I found the seam. Ran my fingers along it, a perfect vertical line hidden behind a stack of moldy boxes. The wall section was separate, built later. When I pushed, it gave slightly. Hinges hidden on the inside. The door, because that's what it was, a door disguised as wall, swung inward on oiled hinges. No squeak, no resistance, like someone had been maintaining it. The hidden room was maybe 8 feet square. Wooden shelves lined 3 walls, floor to ceiling. And on those shelves, arranged neat as a library, sat 6 small backpacks. My hand found the light switch without looking. Fluorescence flickered on, much brighter than the basement bulb. The backpacks jumped into focus. Different colors, different styles, but all from the same era. That specific shade of teal that screamed 1980s. Plastic buckles, cartoon characters I half remembered from being a kid. Each pack sat on its own shelf section. Labeled, I realized. Little brass nameplates screwed into the wood. Nicole Haynes, Kai Lynch, Chelsea Shepard. 3 more names I couldn't read in the newspaper clippings. I reached for Nicole's pack first, pink with white daisies, straps adjusted for small shoulders. Inside, a teddy bear stared up at me with button eyes. Brown fur worn smooth in places from hugging. A ribbon around its neck, yellow satin faded but still tied in a bow. Under the bear, folded clothes. A sweater with a rainbow across the front. Socks with lace edges. Everything clean, everything waiting. Kai's pack held comic books, X-Men, Spider-Man. The covers bright despite their age, pages crisp like they'd been preserved in plastic. A flashlight that still worked when I clicked it. Batteries that should have been dead decades ago. A compass on a string. Boy stuff, adventure stuff. The kind of things a 10-year-old would pack for camping. Chelsea's was the one that stopped me cold. Right on top, a diary. One of those locks that wasn't really a lock, just a tiny clasp to keep brothers from snooping. Pink leather with her name in gold letters. I sat down on the concrete floor and opened it. Her handwriting was careful, the kind kids use when they're trying to impress teachers. Loopy letters, hearts over the eyes. The entries started normal enough. Excited about the camping trip. List of things to pack. Worried her mom wouldn't let her go because of a cold. Then the entries from that October. October 3rd. Pastor Hayes says we can roast marshmallows tonight. Kai keeps saying he saw a bear, but I think he's making it up. The woods are pretty, but also scary when it gets dark. October 4th. The nice lady visited our camp. She lives near here and brought us cookies. Chocolate chip, still warm. She said there are special animals in the bog that only come out for good children. Nicole wants to go see them. October 5th. Going to see the animals tonight after prayers. The lady says we have to be very quiet or we'll scare them. She knows a secret path through the woods. I hope we see deer. The last entry was different, shaky, written fast. Still October 5th, I think. The water is so cold. She said we could play forever if we stayed quiet. Nicole won't stop crying. I want to go home. I want my mom. Why won't she let us leave? The water is getting deeper and The entry cut off mid-sentence. A water stain spread across the bottom of the page, warping the paper. I set the diary down and forced myself to check the other packs. More of the same. Treasures of childhood, carefully preserved. A baseball glove. A music box that played a tinny song when opened. Photographs of families who'd spent 36 years not knowing. Mary had arranged it all. Maintained it. The brass nameplates looked regularly polished. The shelves had been dusted. This wasn't storage. This was a shrine, or a trophy room. I understood then, the playground equipment appearing and vanishing, the lights in the bog, the small hands at the windows. Those kids had been down there since 1987. Not dead, that would have been merciful. Trapped somehow, suspended, their essence feeding that phosphorescent glow, their energy keeping the bog alive with wrongness. Mary had lured them, fed them cookies and promises, led them down the maintenance road to that rotting dock, and then, what? How do you trap a child's soul in dark water? How do you keep them there, aging but not aging, calling but not heard, for 36 years? The fluorescence hummed overhead. The backpacks sat in their neat rows, waiting for children who'd never come back for them. And I sat on that cold concrete floor, holding Chelsea's diary, finally understanding the weight of what I'd inherited. Not just land, not just a house, but Mary's calculated cruelty, her methodical evil. The prison she'd built beneath the bog water, where 6 kids had spent longer than they'd been alive, pulsing with desperate energy every night, trying to break free. I left everything where I'd found it, closed the hidden door, climbed the stairs, But those backpacks stayed with me. 6 small packs, 6 missing kids, 6 souls trapped in amber water, waiting for someone to finally hear them. That final night was different. The voices weren't playing anymore. I sat in the kitchen with all the lights blazing, same as the nights before. But when the glow started spreading across the bog at 9:37, I'd been timing it by then. The sounds that came with it made my stomach clench. "Please!" The word floated through the walls, high and broken. "Please, let us go!" More voices joined in, 6 of them, overlapping, some barely whispers. "It hurts. The water hurts. We want to go home." I pressed my palms against my ears, but the pleading slipped through anyway. Not angry anymore, not even trying to get inside, just desperate. 36 years of desperate compressed into sounds that shouldn't have been able to reach me. "Mommy!" That was Nicole's voice. I was sure of it. The same careful tone from her diary. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good if you let me come home." My hands were shaking. I grabbed Mary's folder from the counter where I'd left it, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. There had to be something. Some way to... The timber sale. Jesus Christ, the timber sale. Northwood would drain the bogs. Standard procedure for harvest access. They'd pump out all that black water, expose whatever was down there. The children would finally surface. I actually smiled for about 3 seconds. Then I found the page I'd missed before, tucked behind the newspaper clippings. Mary's handwriting, neat and terrible. "The binding requires continuous immersion. Disruption without proper transfer will release them physically but not spiritually. They will remain bound to the property boundaries, unable to cross running water or consecrated ground. Torment eternal unless the replacement is made before severance." The pencil in my hand snapped. I hadn't realized I was holding one. She'd known. Of course she'd known. The whole thing was designed to last forever. Either the children stayed trapped in the water, or they became something worse. Ghosts that couldn't leave, couldn't rest, couldn't do anything but exist in whatever form angry child spirits took after decades of drowning. "Please." Kai's voice this time, muffled by water that wasn't really there. "My chest hurts. Everything hurts." I shoved away from the table, pacing the kitchen. The timber company would arrive in the morning. I'd confirmed it yesterday when my phone mysteriously worked for exactly 1 call. 8 a.m. sharp, the surveyor had said. Ashley something. They'd start with property boundaries, test bores for the harvest plan. I could stop them, tell them to leave. But then what? Leave the kids down there forever? Wait for the next person to inherit this nightmare? Or I could let them drain it. Set 6 vengeful spirits loose on 300 acres of Maine wilderness. The property lines went right up to the state forest. Hikers used those trails. Families camped there in summer. My reflection caught in the dark window. I looked like hell. 3 days of no sleep, jumping at shadows. Behind my face, the bog pulsed green and blue, its sick heartbeat marking time. "We'll be quiet," Chelsea whispered from somewhere beneath the water. We learned to be quiet. The lady said we had to be quiet or we'd never get to play again. I went back to the papers. There had to be another way, some loophole in whatever Mary had done. My fingers fumbled through receipts, tax documents, birthday cards from cousins I'd never met. Wait, the basement room. I'd only looked at the backpacks, too disturbed to search further. The stairs groaned under my weight. The hidden door stood open. I hadn't bothered closing it. Why pretend anymore? The fluorescents hummed to life, showing those 6 little backpacks still waiting on their shelves. But now I checked the walls themselves. Behind Chelsea's shelf, almost invisible unless you knew to look, another seam. This door was smaller, painted to match the concrete. No handle. I had to dig my fingernails into the crack and pull. Inside, a metal box on a wooden shelf. Nothing else. The box was locked, but the key hung on a nail right beside it. Mary hadn't been worried about security down here. 3 items inside. A leather journal, water-stained but readable, a glass vial full of something dark, and a single page of instructions in Mary's writing. For voluntary transfer of binding obligation. I read it twice, 3 times. The children's voices had gone quiet outside, but I could feel them listening. Voluntary. That was the key word. Mary had tricked them, lured them with cookies and promises, but the replacement, the person taking their place, had to choose it. I sat on the cold concrete floor, journal in my lap. Mary's entries went back years before 1987. Practice runs with animals. Failed attempts with vagrants she'd found in Portland. The children had been her first success. She'd spent months preparing, studying their routines, learning their names. The final entry was dated just a week before she died. The binding holds but grows unstable. They're getting stronger. I may need to add more to maintain the barrier. Daniel inherits next month. Perhaps he'll prove useful. I threw the journal against the wall. It hit with a wet slap. Dawn was coming. Through the basement window wells, the darkness had that thin quality that meant morning was close. The Northwood team would arrive in 3 hours. I climbed back upstairs, legs heavy. The kitchen felt colder now. Outside, the bog had gone dark, saving its energy for one last show. The children started whispering as soon as I stepped onto the porch. "He's coming," Nicole's voice excited now. "He's coming to let us go." "Don't trust," Kai warned. "The lady said she'd let us go too." "But he's not like her," Chelsea insisted. "He read my diary. He knows." I walked down the porch steps, my work boots squelched in the dew-soaked grass. The path to the bog stretched ahead, that maintenance road I'd walked 3 days ago when I'd first heard them laughing. Had it only been 3 days? The dock materialized out of the morning mist. Same warped boards, same missing planks, but now I could see them clearly. 6 small forms beneath the water, drifting in slow circles around the pilings. "You don't have to," Nicole said, her voice coming from directly below the dock now. "We know what she wrote. We've been listening." I sat on the dock's edge, feet dangling. The water looked black in the pre-dawn light. No phosphorescence now. Just dark water hiding 36 years of horror. "If I don't," I said, surprised my voice worked. "What happens when they drain it?" Silence. Then Kai, matter of fact, "We'll be angry. We don't want to be angry," Chelsea added quickly. "But we will be. We can't help it. The water changed us." I thought about the timber crew arriving. Ashley the surveyor with her test bores and boundary maps. Warren the foreman who just wanted profitable trees. They'd never know what they were releasing. Car engines in the distance, earlier than expected. "They're coming," I said. The children's forms rose closer to the surface. I could see them clearly now. Not bones anymore, but not quite flesh either. Suspended between states, wearing the tatters of their last day. "You read the words?" Nicole asked. I nodded. The page of instructions was in my shirt pocket, though I'd memorized them on the walk down. "It won't hurt," she promised. "Not like it hurt us. You're choosing." The car engines got louder, 2 vehicles from the sound of it. They'd park by the house, knock on the door, then start setting up their equipment when no one answered. I stood up, took off my boots, setting them neat on the dock. My socks, too. The wooden boards felt rough under bare feet. "Thank you," Chelsea whispered. The others echoed her, a chorus of gratitude that made my throat tight. I didn't jump. That felt too dramatic. I just stepped off the dock's edge. The water was warmer than I'd expected. It closed over my head gentle-like, not the violent pulling I'd imagined. I opened my eyes underwater and saw them clearly, 6 children floating in a circle around me, their faces peaceful for the first time in decades. I spoke their names, bubbles carrying the words, Nicole Haynes, Kai Lynch, Chelsea Shepard. The 3 damaged nameplates came next, but somehow I knew them. Marcus Chen, Trinity Walker, James Fitzgerald. The exchange happened fast. One moment I was sinking, the water filling my lungs without pain. The next, I was somewhere else. Not drowning, but not breathing either. Suspended in amber darkness that held me gentle but firm. Above me the children rose. Their forms grew solid as they broke the surface, water streaming off real skin and hair and clothes. 6 kids climbing out of a bog pool, blinking in the morning sun. I watched them walk toward shore. Their movements were hesitant at first, like they'd forgotten how legs worked, but with each step they got steadier, more real. "Thank you," Nicole said again, turning back once. Her face was exactly like her diary photo, round cheeks, missing front tooth, dark hair and pigtails. They reached the shore just as the sun broke the tree line. The light hit them and they just dissolved. Not violent or scary, more like morning mist burning off, peaceful and natural. One moment 6 kids stood on the bog's edge. The next, Only empty air. The water around me started to drain. I felt it pulling away, leaving me on silty bottom as the bog emptied itself. But I wasn't solid anymore. Couldn't feel the mud or the cold or anything except a strange lightness. "Hello?" A woman's voice from above. Professional, confused. "Is someone down there?" Ashley Field stood at the dock's edge, looking down at the drained bog pool. Warren Adams beside her, already calculating board feet from the surrounding trees. They couldn't see me. I was part of the bog now, spread through every pool and channel, not trapped like the children had been. Different. I'd chosen this. "Weird," Warren said, nudging my boots with his toe. "Owner must have gone for a swim." "In October?" Ashley frowned, but she was already pulling out her surveying equipment. "Well, makes our job easier. No water to deal with." They spent 6 hours mapping the property. I watched from everywhere and nowhere, feeling the land shift as they marked trees and took soil samples. They never questioned the empty bog, never wondered about the boots on the dock or the car in the driveway or the house with every light still burning. By afternoon, they'd finished. Perfect timberland, Ashley declared. Excellent drainage, mature growth, easy access once they cut a proper road. The main office would be thrilled. They left as the sun set, planning to return with a full crew next week. The purchase would go through, abandoned property, no owner to be found. Clean transfer to Northwood Timber, who'd harvest every profitable tree and never know they'd bought more than wood. I settled into the empty bog as darkness fell. No phosphorescence now. No desperate voices or reaching shadows. Just quiet land waiting for whatever came next. The children were free. That's what mattered. 6 kids who'd waited 36 years for someone to trade places. Not from guilt or tricks or force, just because it was the right thing to do. The timber crew would find nothing when they drained the other pools. Maybe they'd wonder about the playground equipment holes, the hidden room, the 6 small backpacks gathering dust, but probably not. They had trees to cut and money to make. And I had 300 acres to watch over. Not a bad trade, all things considered. Better than letting those kids stay trapped forever. Better than unleashing them angry and hurt. Sometimes the right choice isn't about what you want. It's about what needs doing. The stars came out over the empty bog, and I spread myself thin through the mud and roots and water channels, keeping watch. Peaceful now. Finally, properly peaceful.